Terence Shanley. I was a Lieutenant JG in the United States Navy. And by that time, they transferred me over to be an advisor to a Vietnamese squadron. So it was myself and 2 enlisted, Vietnamese Squadron 22. I was a senior advisor. I had 2 enlisted. And we went with these Vietnamese boats up the Mekong for the invasion of Cambodia. After the invasion, I came back and went up to Cam Ranh Bay I was training Vietnamese swift boat crews and officers to turn the boats over to the Vietnamese. Eventually the boats at Cam Ranh were turned over to them, and I left Vietnam in August of 1970. And when I left, they said to us that, they said to me, if you want to stay in the Navy, then we'll give you a posting somewhere along the East Coast, maybe as a recruiting officer or something like that. If you don't want to stay in the Navy, then you can get out. So I said, I'll get out. So after all, I wasn't going to make it a career. And so they let me out in September of 1970. They went back to the States. I went home. I went down to the Brooklyn Navy Yard and had lunch with a friend of mine who was a lawyer who was serving in JAG in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Had 28 months to go. And I said, oh, I'm being discharged. So that was the 22 months from start to finish, if you exclude the Army service. So 22 months in the Navy. And I might say that one of the things that troubled me the most coming back from Vietnam was that in the 1970s, it seemed that every TV show and movie that wanted to portray a homicidal maniac always portrayed that homicidal maniac as a returning Vietnam veteran. He was, quote, a killer, and Vietnam veterans were commonly portrayed that way in movies and television shows. And in my experience, that was the furthest from the truth. We could have, swift boat, twin 50 caliber machine guns, a third 50 caliber machine gun. If they focus on something and start firing, I mean, they just chew it to pieces. And we had Vietnamese rough puffs fire over our heads coming down rivers because we didn't see them in our wake, rocked our boats. And they actually fired over our heads. And no, we didn't fire back. Sailors were so disciplined, they didn't fire back. They'd have killed them all on a boat like that, and we just rode on by, and of course they could see that the tracer ammunition wasn't Russian tracer ammunition, it's American tracer ammunition, which gives you the idea that they're locals, But the men were very disciplined in their treatment of civilians. And, we saw them all the times in coastal zones at night. These people are trying to earn a living, they're trying to survive in the middle of a war. But we would check them and then we'd move along. We did our job, but we were also I felt we were conscious of the needs of civilians to move in a war zone, and that most of these people are just ordinary people, and we try to be very respectful of that, and I think we were very respectful of that. It was very troubling to come back and hear Vietnam veterans being portrayed as homicidal killers, And the trip back, when we came back from August of 1970, I was going to New York City, and we landed at San Francisco. We got in at maybe 2 a.m. in the morning, and it said, there was a sign over the ramp leading us that said, "Welcome to the world," and there's nobody there. And so most of the men, a good part of the men, took off their uniforms to fly at them out of San Francisco. when you're returning from a combat zone to America, you're coming from simply another world, and you know, and you feel that, and it's a very isolating feeling because people don't know what to say, and quite frankly, no one wants to hear about your war experience. Not that you really want to discuss it with them, but if you want a conversation stopper, you just tell somebody in this world today that you served in Vietnam. I mean silence. Okay, so I don't talk about anybody with it, really, because frankly, a great many people, great many men, in my age group did not serve, which I don't mind. I mean, Columbia University was a hotbed of getting war activity. But they did not serve. And they're very, you know, I've sat there while people went on and on about how they were able to get a medical discharge, and they didn't serve, and you know, it was a stupid war, and on and on and on about it. All of which I don't mind the opinion. That's their opinion, and I don't mind that at all. I really don't. But you can't talk to them. You can't say you served, or if you do, you can't talk to them in any way about that, because quite frankly, it's embarrassing them. They're embarrassed by the fact that you served and they didn't. And it makes them uncomfortable, and there's a long silence which follows any discussion of your service. And that's why Vietnam veterans don't talk about it. Quite frankly, honestly, no one wants to hear about it, except other veterans. No one. Because they're embarrassed about it. They're embarrassed about what they did during the war. They're embarrassed about what America did during the war. It's a lost war. And in America, everything is winning. American culture is built around winning. Okay? There is a winner in the Super Bowl and there is a loser in the Super Bowl. And the loser, it doesn't matter how they played, they lost. Okay? And that colors America's view of the Vietnam War. It's a loss. And that's how America sees it. And they're embarrassed about it. And it's very isolating for the Vietnam veterans. So, that's the way it is.